All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we are taking a grand, thousand-year journey to trace how shifting geopolitics and groundbreaking military technology completely define the three foundational Islamic empires. We're going to look directly at how the specific ways these empires fought dictated how they ruled, how they fell, and how they ultimately rose again from the ashes to dominate the globe.
To ground us, take a look at this timeline. We're traveling from 600 CE all the way up to 1600 CE, and you can see these really distinct turning points. We've got markers here for the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the arrival of the Seljuks, that terrifying Mongol sack of Baghdad, and finally, the Ottoman gunpowder era. You're definitely going to want to keep this mental map handy, because as you'll see, the evolution of warfare is the main engine driving every single one of these milestones.
Now, to tackle a massive millennium of history without getting lost, we're just going to slice it into 5 key eras, taking us from the dawn of the empires straight through to that Ottoman gunpowder revolution.
So, let's kick things off with era number 1, the dawn of the empires, and the first major wave of expansion. Following the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632, the Islamic world saw some incredibly rapid, colossal conquests. But after that initial expansion, we see a huge defining shift in 661. The Umayyad dynasty takes over, and they were fiercely outward expansionists. They moved the capital to Damascus, they kept a super strong Arab identity, and they relentlessly pushed their borders from Central Asia all the way over to the Iberian Peninsula. But, internal divisions eventually mounted, leading to a really brutal overthrow. And out of that chaos in 750, the Abbasid dynasty steps up. They totally toppled the Umayyads and pulled a complete 180, drastically shifting the empire's focus away from rapid military expansion and turning it almost entirely inward.
Which brings us right into our second era, the Abbasid Golden Age, where intellect truly took priority over armor.
See, as the Abbasids settled into power, they ushered in this magnificent cultural peak, but it came with a massive and, frankly, fatal strategic cost. They basically hit the brakes on those expansionist military policies and founded Baghdad, turning it into this prosperous, bustling hub of multicultural scholarship. They're translating Greek scientific texts, gathering poets, physicians, astronomers. It's beautiful. But here is the critical trade-off. While they were busy building libraries, they severely neglected the physical defense of their borders. Gradually, the Abbasid Caliph lost actual political and military muscle, kind of becoming just a figurehead, while local Persian and Turkic dynasties started carving up and taking physical control of the outer territories.
And that glaring vulnerability sets the stage for era number 3, the sudden arrival of horse archers and a massive nomadic disruption.
So picture this. What happens when an undefended, highly cultured, inward-looking empire suddenly collides with a radical new military technology straight out of the Central Asian steppes? Well, the geopolitical map changes forever. In the 10th and 11th centuries, Turkic nomads arrived through a fascinating 3-step process. First, they converted to Sunni Islam. Second, they gradually migrated into the Middle East. And third, they executed a full political takeover of Abbasid lands. Because their entire economy and lifestyle were based on horses, these nomads were able to completely shatter the traditional borders of the Abbasid world, all without erasing the underlying religion.
It was a military mismatch of epic proportions. You had Abbasid defenses relying on these static, unmoving garrisons, heavily fragmented local loyalties, and a caliph who only really provided symbolic leadership. Then, in stark contrast, you have the Turkic nomads, like the Seljuks. They are bringing lightning-fast mobility, legendary mounted archers, and aggressive tribal advancement to the table. Those static Abbasid defenses were utterly obsolete against the unmatchable speed of nomadic archers. So by 1055, the Sunni Seljuks just waltz in and take control of Baghdad. They protected the Abbasid Caliph as a symbol of religious legitimacy, sure, but make no mistake, the Seljuks held all the actual military might.
But if the Seljuks were a disruption, our fourth era is an absolute nightmare. The Mongol catastrophe.
An even darker storm was brewing, one that would bring the Abbasid Caliphate to a devastating, violent climax. In 1258, the Mongol ruler Hulagu Khan breaches Baghdad, and as historians later noted, the great library of the city, known as the House of Wisdom, was no more. Hulagu basically obliterated 500 years of cultural flourishing in a merciless bloodbath that practically ended the Islamic Golden Age overnight. The Mongols operated as highly skilled mounted archers, much like the Turks before them, but with a level of brutality that was just unprecedented.
I mean, listen to this detail. It is bizarre, but it perfectly encapsulates the absolute collapse of the old political order. The dynasty that stood for 5 centuries as a beacon of intellect was literally crushed into the dirt. The very last Abbasid caliph was rolled into a carpet and trampled to death beneath the hooves of Mongol horses, just yielding entirely to a vastly superior, terrifying military machine.
Okay, but out of this chaotic destruction, a really unique defensive countermeasure pops up over in Egypt, the Mamluks. Now, the Mamluks were elite Turkic slave soldiers originally brought from the steppes. They had served as vital muscle for years, but in the 13th century, this warrior class actually seized ultimate political power in Egypt. The slaves literally became the masters of the region.
And the reason they are so absolutely crucial to our timeline is what they pull off next. Using the exact same step tactics as their enemies, the Mamluks finally repelled the Mongols in 1260 at the Battle of Ain Jalut. They halted the advance. This massive victory over the Mongols earned them this reputation as the true defenders of Islam. And then, brilliantly, just to cement their legitimacy, they propped up a figurehead, creating this shadow Abbasid caliphate right there in Cairo. They fought fire with fire. Horse archers were halted by horse archers.
Which finally brings us to our 5th and final era, where the rules of the game change entirely, the Ottoman Gunpowder Revolution.
This is where the Islamic world is resurrected. But importantly, not by reverting back to horse archers. No, they bounced back through a revolutionary technological leap. The Ottomans didn't just survive the post-Mongol chaos, they dominated it. They started as this small Turkic principality in Anatolia led by a guy named Osman. And by 1453, they actually conquer the ancient Byzantine capital of Constantinople, literally ending 1,000 years of Byzantine rule. The key here is that they heavily adopted state-of-the-art weaponry to create impregnable borders, standing tall as one of the 3 great early modern gunpowder empires.
To put their success into perspective, the Ottoman Sultan Selim the Grim literally tripled the size of the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century alone. Tripled it. And he pulled off this jaw-dropping expansion by leaning heavily into one single, game-changing innovation.
We are talking about a complete paradigm shift in warfare. For centuries, the era of the steppe relied entirely on horse mobility, mounted archery, and nomadic conquests. You know, the exact stuff that terrified and controlled the Abbasids. But this new Ottoman era, from the 15th century onward, it relied on cannons, gunpowder, and massive fortified sieges. The nimble, terrifying horse archer was decisively replaced by the thundering, wall-shattering dominance of Ottoman gunpowder.
By 1517, using this raw gunpowder technology, Selim the Grim captures Cairo. He terminates the Mamluks' shadow Abbasid caliphate entirely, and he boldly declares himself the new caliph. With this explosive military advantage, the Ottomans seized ultimate political legitimacy, fusing supreme military force with the highest religious title. And they created an empire that would endure for another 600 years.
So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. The Ottoman Empire fell relatively recently, right after the First World War and the 20th century. But when you look at the borders, the cultures, and the complex conflicts of today's Middle East, how much of it is still echoing those profound military and political shifts we just witnessed? History isn't just about the past, it's the blueprint for our present. Thanks for learning with me today.